Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. Later in the show, we have an important update on the story we've been covering for more than a year, the treatment of the mentally ill in the criminal justice system. But first, with elections fast approaching, we are going to start looking at some of the major races and candidates. One of the critical races is a seat for Miami-Dade School Board. Former school board member Martin Karp is running to get back on the board. He previously served from 2004 to 2020. He is running for an open seat representing the northeast part of the county against Joe Geller. And Martin Karp is here today. Martin, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
All right, I want to get to why you're running again and all that sort of stuff, but I want to start with the news this week, which was tragic out of Georgia, another school shooting, and it again puts the focus on what we can do to make our schools safer. You served on the school board for 16 years. I know recently there have been discussions to maybe install metal detectors at Miami-Dade schools, but the school board has rejected that. Broward is now moving forward with metal detectors. I'm curious, one, your comments on the shooting in Georgia and where we are, and whether or not metal detectors are an answer for Miami-Dade.
It's very disturbing that these things continue. I'm willing to support anything that would protect the students' safety. The reality is that when I first started on the board, we had multiple access points to get into our schools. Interestingly, the reason for that was more for fire safety. And what we had to do was limit the access points to the schools so there'd be a single entry point, and that was because now of safety against shooters. So things have changed dramatically. So I believe any measure that the school board chief of police would recommend to the board, because they're the experts on this and we have our own police force, that we should be able to follow through on that and make it happen as soon as possible, because ultimately when parents send their kids to school, they want to know that they're safe, and the people who are working in the building, the teachers and staff, should be protected. We did a lot of actions while I was on the board, including hardening classrooms. There's a list of different things that we did in particular, that we added 350 new school resource officers. We had active shooter training for school personnel, and we had the implementation of 18,000 cameras at district and school sites. We also created the mental health department and the creation of the police command for all safety security events. Okay. And so these are things that we did, but we have to do more.
So let's go back to, let's almost reset here. Why are you running again? You served for 16 years. Why do you want back on the school board?
Sure. Well, I believe, first of all, I missed it, and this was my passion. I started teaching 33 years ago. My experience is in education, and I didn't think that the seat would open up. But when it did, I gave it some thought. We had some health issues we were dealing with at home, so I didn't pursue that. But then it was specific to my wife, but things got better, and ultimately I had considered it as soon as the current board member announced that she was not going to seek re-election. So finally I got the go-ahead at home, but it's something I always missed. I felt like this was, I understood the schools. I was born and raised here. I graduated from Miami Beach Senior High School, and so I believe that I can come back to the board and represent and do the things that we need to do to make things better for our students.
And what's the top on that list?
So I believe the top on that list is really a focus on our basic skills, but to do it where there's a joy of learning. So I think that what we have to ensure is that our kids are not only getting the basics, but when they graduate, they have a skill in their back pocket. So for example, it could be in automotive maintenance, in coding, in robotics, because when I would shake hands with the students as they were graduating, a lot of them had a plan, but some of them didn't. So we need to ensure that they have a plan, and we know that students may change their mind 3 or 4 times. People change their careers. So if you have that skill, let's say in automotive maintenance, and you're not sure what your next step is, at least you can do something when you graduate, when you're out there in the community, and then you can shift gears but have something to work with. And that's one of my big priorities.
Now, one of the things we've seen in recent years, particularly since Ron DeSantis has become governor, is is school boards have become heavily politicized.
Yes.
And we're seeing a lot of the culture war battles. I guess I want to get a more general guess from you, or feeling from you. Do you agree in general with what Ron DeSantis has been doing with schools throughout the state of Florida, and particularly in Miami-Dade?
Well, I don't agree with anything to make the schools political. When I was on the board, and you could look at my website, and it's not what I posted, it's from the school board minutes. I had over 100 initiatives that were approved by my colleagues, and none of those initiatives, you'll see, they were not political, they were educational. They focused on dropout prevention, increasing the graduation rate, finding out whether we need to provide more programs for students with dual exceptionalities.
I do understand that, but
right.
we're
I
in a
don't
different
support anything that's political. I believe we need to focus on the classroom. Our kids don't want it, the parents don't want it, and what's interesting is when I go out and I meet people, if I speak to people that are more on the liberal side of the equation, they tell me that they don't want the culture wars, and when I speak to people on the more conservative side, they tell me they don't want the indoctrination. So I think everyone has come to the agreement where we just want education.
But do you think that the schools have been used to indoctrinate children?
Well, I think that I did a board item, and it was my last board item on political biases, and yes, what happened was, and the student advisor spoke to it, students were actually feeling like they couldn't express their views in class if they were in opposition to what the teacher believed. And in fact, I think it was like 40% of 11th graders feared losing a letter grade. I had a student who came to me and said that his grade was lowered because his view was different than that of the teachers, and then a committee raised his letter grade.
But let me ask you
I do believe that.
Let me ask you some specifics.
Sure.
Do you agree with DeSantis' decision to ban instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity?
Well, when you talk about that, you talk about the grade levels that are there.
Well, this is now through grade 12.
Right. I don't think that, I think the way we were doing things on the school board, where it was focused on education and on the basic skills, is what we should be doing. And getting into all these other conversations, some of these are matters that are dealt with at home and not in the classroom. Especially there are people that aren't trained in those areas. We have people that are, and that we have counseling and other things that deal with specific issues, but I'm not in favor of programs, or I think we need to focus solely on the reading, the math, the science, the social studies,
I get that,
the subjects that help our students get to the next point.
But for instance, you know, the last 2 years, the Miami-Dade School Board has voted against, you know, a Gay Pride Month, which is normally in October.
Sure.
If that measure came before the board while you were on today, how would you be voting for it?
Well, actually, there is a measure on this board right now for the Tuesday board meeting.
How would you vote on it?
So there's an item right now I would like to talk about, and it's LGBTQ History Month, and that's coming up this Wednesday, and I think that's the item we're talking about because it infuses the pride.
I've got a limited amount of time.
I understand that, so I'm going to answer that.
It
Depends what the item says. So, for example, right now there's a board item that talks about discrimination against students. I reject all forms of discrimination against students, and I think that that item, if it focuses on discrimination and it focuses on giving kids the services and the support that they need, then I would support it. I would support any item that protects students, and I'm not just talking about it, Jim. In 16 years, that's exactly what I did. So this item that actually the person who succeeded me is bringing forward addresses LGBTQ History Month, and in that item, she talks about kids committing suicide. She talks about discrimination in the classroom, and I would support any item that will protect our students if it's suicide prevention, if it's discrimination or anything like that.
So, okay, I'm not sure I fully understand whether or not you would vote for or against the measure on LGBTQ History Month.
It depends on how the item's proposed. So, for example, I'll address that specifically. So the item actually, the subject in this board meeting, the subject is different from the body and it's different from the action proposed. In the body of the item, and this is how a school board member does this, so this is what I want to explain. I never missed a board meeting in 16 years. I never missed a committee day in 16 years. So the item as presented, to answer it, you can't answer it simply. The item as it's presented, in the subject it says one thing about LGBTQ History Month. In the the body, it talks about suicide prevention, that students who are LGBTQ are more likely to commit suicide. But in the action proposed, you know what it says? Not to touch the curriculum materials, not to touch instruction, but to simply recognize it as a history month. So the item, the body, doesn't match the action. You have to have all three match because you vote on the action that's proposed. No, I would not vote against it or for it. I would vote to have the item. No, Jim, let me explain.
No, I got to move on.
No, I have to explain that. The action has to match it. If the action matched the body of her item, which says that we have to have discrimination-free schools, then I would actually support the item.
You talk about education.
I would support the item.
I want to go back.
I would support the item, though.
Okay. Last year, the Florida Board of Education set new standards for teaching African American history.
Yes.
Part of it calls for teaching that, quote, slaves developed skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. Do you agree with that?
I reject anything that whitewashes American history. I taught history. I don't agree with anything that alters history.
So you think that DeSantis and the Board of Education was wrong on that?
I would have to look at his exact quote, but I would disagree. If that's the case, I disagree with anything that alters history. Anything. History should be taught as it occurred, but we have to use multiple sources. I'm in the middle of a campaign where there are mail pieces that say that one thing happened and they didn't. So it has to be factual, and it has to be more than one source as well, because using multiple sources does not always is what gets to the bottom of things.
I want to talk to you about the OIG report.
Absolutely.
So there was an OIG report that came out a couple of years ago,
yes,
in which a group, Shabbat Shahil, was given free access to schools, right, for 10 years. Didn't get to pay fees, and more insidiously, did not have the background checks necessary to operate after-school programs on that.
Right. That
came about, according to the OIG report, because you and your office pressured the schools to allow this program in without doing the proper vetting.
Yeah, actually, the report affirmed that I did everything correctly. Page 1 of the report clearly states not only that I didn't pressure anybody, but the fact of the matter is that the report...
The OIG investigation also substantiated the allegation that school board member Karp's office aided Shabbat Shahil in gaining free use of school facilities.
No. If you look at page 1 of the report, that's not page 1 of the report. Page 1 of the report said that Martin Karp did not act inappropriately. The exact words was did not coerce anybody. That's the only charge they brought. And by the way...
They said, no, but there were members, there was a principal who actually said that while you didn't twist his arm, he did feel that he had to do this because you were requesting it and you're a school board member.
Right. First of all, that's not true. Number one, the report...
Well, he said it.
Oh, Jim, the report bears out that on page 1, that number 1, that I did not do that, and number 2, the report actually affirms that I acted appropriately. And what's interesting about that is...
But your chief of staff certainly didn't.
The chief of staff acted appropriately. We have an affidavit that was not...
No.
Jim, we have an affidavit...
There's a 1,000-page report that documents exactly
Where's the
what
camera?
it is.
I would like to look into the camera. So the fact is that 1,000-page report actually affirms that we did everything correctly. My chief of staff sent a couple of emails, I think 3 in total, because staff, this is a large bureaucracy, didn't respond. We didn't do anything inappropriately. In fact, we helped an after-school organization, and what is not being mentioned is there were 2,000 after-school programs getting fee waivers. 2,600 very similar to this. And by the way, those programs, there was not a single cost to the taxpayers. No, there was a zero cost to taxpayers.
They lost
all programs.
There was $1.3 million in fees that they should have collected according to the OIG.
That's not what the report says. That's not what the report says.
Also,
not a single penny. Ask the chief financial officer. Not a single penny of taxpayer money was taken.
The problem was because this program didn't go through the proper vetting, because of the influence that you and your office put on
false.
it.
That's
the
false.
Inspector General said in a hearing before the school board,
right,
this could have put kids at risk.
Yeah, so that's false, number one. Number two, background checks are done by not only the school district, but this was a children's trust program. It has nothing to do with the school board member's office. Absolutely
the Jessica
nothing.
Lunsford Act requires that if you're going to use school facilities like that, they have to go through the check, and they didn't.
They did, actually. They did. It's just technicalities. They did, but this is something that's checked by not only the school district, has nothing to do with a school board member, and the fact is that hundreds of after-school programs were operating, and so they single out one program. There's definitely nothing there that says our office had anything to do with background checks or the safety of students. And by the way, what you're not mentioning is that the conclusion of the report, as I said earlier on page 1, shows nothing that I did. And number two, what's also interesting is if you look at this, there was an audit committee that followed. The IG herself stated that, number one, not only was there no wrongdoing on my part, but the IG herself stated, let me finish, there was no penalties. There were no charges. It was not forwarded to the state attorney. It wasn't forwarded to anybody.
Did you agree not to run for re-election back then because of this report?
No, I had decided in the middle of my 4th term that I wasn't going to run for re-election. It had nothing to do with it. I served for 16 years. I was tired. I didn't run for well, if that's the case, why would I run now? That IG said...
I don't know why you can look at me.
Well, I want to let the viewers know.
Yeah.
That IG specifically said in the audit committee, we are not forwarding this report. We are not pressing any charges. We are not filing anything. There's no evidence of wrongdoing on my part. That's amazing. Can you imagine? I was audited and I passed. That's great.
I don't know that this report is a passing grade for you.
Yeah, but there's okay, so it is a passing grade. My record is clear. But by the way, this is the problem, Jim. You have not asked me one question about the dropout rate. How do we improve graduation rates? You haven't asked me. No. What you're interested in is what everybody else is interested in.
What I'm interested in is how you are going to use your position to benefit another organization. Which,
I never
according to this report,
I never did.
It suggests that you did.
This is not an honest conversation. I never ever used my office for anything. I operated at the highest level of integrity.
We'll post the IG report on our website.
You can post that. Also post my 100 initiatives. Post the fact that people like Nancy Ankrum said that, I'm sorry that you left the board. We miss your service even more. Post the fact that people like David Lawrence say, I believe in you. Look at my website and look at the 200 plus testimonials. Don't cut that out. That's my testimonials. People on my website have said wonderful things about my service.
They can also look at the IG report and see for themselves.
And by the way, we don't talk about students with dual exceptionalities. We don't talk about any of the things that matter for our children each and every day. That's why I'm running, because we talk about politics, but we don't talk about education.
Because school boards have been turned into political minefields.
Not by me. I was there 16 years. No evidence of politics when I served. None.
When did you become a Republican?
Excuse me?
You became a Republican, right?
Well, I'm actually a nonpartisan.
Now,
that's
you were
correct.
When did you switch from Democrat to Republican?
I think it was in September of 2023.
And why?
It was a personal matter that had nothing to do with education, and this is a nonpartisan race. Okay. It was deeply personal.
All right. Martin Karp, thank you for coming in.
Nonpartisan race.
When we come back, is Miami-Dade County finally ready to open a long-promised mental health facility? We talk to County Commissioner Raquel Regalado and Judge Steve Leifman after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. For nearly 2 decades, Miami-Dade County officials have been working on opening a mental health facility that could treat people with mental illnesses rather than arresting them and warehousing them in local jails. The county has spent millions renovating a building and developing a plan to offer services. For years, the county has been promising the facility, known as the Miami Center for Mental Health and Recovery, that it will soon be open. They've been promising that all along, but then nothing happens. Is that about to change? That's the question I have for my 2 guests. Joining me are County Commissioner Raquel Regalado. She has been working on finding a way forward on this issue for months, and Judge Steve Leifman, who has been championing this issue and this facility from the outset. I want to thank both of you for coming in, because I do think this is that day where we've been waiting for a while. Raquel, I'm going to start with you. Commissioner, we've got some news. I think things are finally moving, aren't they?
Yes, we finally have an item. We finally have an agreement. It has been a very long process, and I want to thank thank Judge Leifman for really forcing the county to take a position on this. He was talking about mental health before it became sexy. And the last thing that we want is to turn our jail facilities into homeless shelters. So everything kind of converged over the last year and a half, and we've been able to find a provider, find the funding, and bring an item, which now I am bringing to Policy Council tomorrow, that will then go before the Board of County Commissioners, hopefully in our next September meeting. And it's already in the budget. We're ready to go. Once we get this passed, we'll be able to start purchasing the furniture and really providing the service that our community so very much needs.
So again, I'm just going to recap because I think it's important to understand. It's somewhere between $16, $18 million, somewhere in that range, that's been allocated for this coming year. You found a provider to actually provide those mental health services. That was one of the stick-ups. That was also, you also, as you said, got the furniture, all those sorts of things. So we're finally going to be able to move forward. On Monday, it goes before a committee on the County Commission, and then hopefully within 2 weeks after that, it gets finally approved by the County Commission, and then we should be able to see it open when, Judge Leifman?
Hopefully first quarter next year.
All right. So why is this facility so important?
Because we are spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year warehousing people with mental illnesses that could be treated. We spend about $414 million a year just to warehouse people with mental illnesses in our jail. We did this amazing analysis. We looked at everybody with a serious mental illness over 5 years that are eligible for diversion to a program. It came out to 16,000 people over 5 years. Over the last 5 years, they spent over 1.2 million days in the Dade County Jail at exorbitant cost, and we got nothing for it. We just keep repeating the bad program problem again and again. This will break the cycle.
Because you're not getting the services you need in a jail setting.
No.
But you're still paying $325 a day.
Per person.
Per person. So it's a very expensive, and also, like you said, it's just a loop. It's just a loop. And it's only going to get worse because now, starting October 1st, we have to arrest people for being unhoused. And the majority of the people who are unhoused and in encampments have schizophrenia or are bipolar. So now we're going to have even more people in our jails. And one of the things that our item does is divert those people so that they never see the jail and they go directly into this facility.
And remember, when they're in jail, the county has to pick up 100% of the cost. And people don't understand, but they also have really serious primary health issues. Yeah. So their primary health care, their mental health care has to be paid by the county 100%. The second they move over into this facility, most of them become eligible for Medicaid, and we're able to leverage the federal dollars to substantially reduce the cost to the county. So you improve public safety, you save taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars, and you give people an opportunity of hope and recovery that they haven't had. And we break the cycle, and Dade County becomes the first county in the United States to functionally get rid of homelessness.
Commissioner, I don't want to get into a blame game, but why does something like this take so long? I mean, when I said at the outset that this has been a plan in the works for decades. It's true. And I give you all the credit for stepping forward and taking an issue that doesn't have a lot of upside. You know, it's not like you're going to win a lot of votes from mentally ill prisoners, you know, as a result of giving them decent and humane treatment. So why is it taking so long?
Well, I think we had differing policies at the county commission, and there was a shift. There was, at first it was, and then it wasn't. You know, I think it's a difficult issue. Look, whenever we talk about jails, about criminals, about homelessness, you and I, you know, talked about this when I worked with Carlos Martinez on civil citations when I was a school board member, and people accused me of hugging thugs. You know, that actually happened. We did the first civil citation diversion program. You know, now everyone embraces it, and it's such a wonderful thing, but it was very difficult when we do it. So I give him credit. He's a visionary. He's done amazing work getting policy makers to come forward. But then we reached a fiscal issue, right? There was the provider, the fiscal issue, the procurement issue, the logistics. And a lot of times in government, that's where you get jammed up. And I know he was frustrated. And it was just a matter of bringing the right people to the table. I want to thank the mayor and her staff for helping us with this. The mayor has really been wonderful and very supportive, as been staff. And we had to negotiate. He'll tell you, I'm a tough negotiator. We had to negotiate a few things, you know.
Wait, he wanted more money. Yeah. He did, you know. But it's important. And what's key here is, and why this is so important, what this step is because once this opens, once this starts moving, then it will, if it needs to grow, it will grow.
Yes.
And it's sort of like getting that foot in the door finally and tackling this issue in a meaningful way.
And he doesn't have to raise money, and we're working on
and
the
we're
other
already doing
pieces
that.
of
We're
it.
raising philanthropy dollars. We have a huge grant we just put in yesterday that is a game changer. Also, what this will do is major research. We're going to be able to show how much money this saves, how it improves public safety, and it's going to be a workforce development. We don't have enough workers in this community to do this work either. So there'll be internships, fellowships, residencies, all in this building, so we can grow our
mental
own
health
staff.
and rehabilitation, and it is a national model.
And I want you to repeat the one number you gloss over quickly. How much money has been spent? How much money will likely be saved because this is open?
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
Well, I think you said 400 million before?
Yeah, a year.
400 million a year.
Yeah.
For a $16 million or a $17 million investment.
It's a no-brainer.
Yes.
All right, we're going to have to end it there.
Okay.
Again,
and I want to thank the commissioner and the mayor. They really have stepped up on this. You know, part of the problem, you had a new commissioner and a new mayor inherit another project. And so there's a lot of re-education. They weren't that familiar with it.
I got to cut you
everybody's
off. All right, but we're going to stay on top of this issue. You can be sure we're not going anywhere, although we'll be right back now after the break. Bye.
Thank you. Sorry.
If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact me at jdefede@cbs.com. I do enjoy hearing from you. Well, that's all the time we have. We'll be back again next week. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.